It's fun to see you guys. I haven't seen
Yeah.
anybody in so long.
Oh my God, yes.
It's been a while.
I'm just gonna share my screen here.
Oh, it's Camila. It's exciting that Camila is teaching that class.
It is. Oh, hey, Ellen.
All right, welcome everyone to the second professional practice event. I think, yeah, second. Whole new crew of people that I'm excited to introduce and hear more about. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. So give me 1 second here. There we go. Hello and welcome to our spring 2022 professional practice series. My name is Alonso Pantoja and I use he, they pronouns. And I am gonna go start with a visual description of myself. So in case we have anyone with low vision participating tonight, I am a brown man with glasses and dark hair sitting in a home studio space. All right, and before I introduce our speakers and begin this event, I want to respectfully acknowledge that the land we are occupying in Minneapolis is unceded territory, the ancestral homelands of the Dakota Anishinaabe peoples. Gathering here, we pay our respects to the elders, both past and present. We acknowledge the great harm that colonialism brought to these lands, in particular, the erasure of both indigenous and African identities, not only under slavery, but via racist laws that have segregated all people. We honor those who have lived and do live at these intersections of identity and experience. And if you'd like to learn more about land acknowledgements, feel free to take a screenshot of this. I'll pause for a few seconds. Great. This event is sponsored by the MCAD MFA Program, which is a community of makers, thinkers, researchers, and creative professionals working in a mentor-based interdisciplinary environments. And if you'd like to learn more, you can visit mcad-mfa.com. Just a few notes, your audio and video will be muted for this webinar. If you experience any technical difficulties, please email us at av_support@mcad.edu. Please feel free to leave questions in the chat and we will select from the submissions after our speakers have presented. A recording of this webinar will be made available to MCAD students after the event. And then just a few thank yous. So thank you to Kylie Van Note, Nikki Motokellam, and then Bob, our AV support for tonight. And I just want to take a moment to share our next professional practice series that will take place via Zoom, April 20th at 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time, online, free, but registration is required. And again, if you want to take a moment to visit the link there, you're welcome to take a screenshot for this. I'll pause. Great. And then now for tonight's event, conferencing, conventions, book fairs, and now I will go ahead and introduce our speakers. María José Castillo is a Colombian artist and graphic designer. They work mainly on the subjects of language and communication using printmaking, editorial design, lettering, and animation as their media. Our second guest, Molly Murakami, is a cartoonist and writer from Minneapolis, Minnesota, whose work often centers on themes of family, history, and thought processes. And lastly, our third guest, Rachael Bonebright, is an artist and illustrator working in the Twin Cities who works primarily in ink and other traditional media. And then now I will turn it over to them and see what they have to share. And then María José, if you want to take it away, you can.
Okay, 1 second. Sorry, I think that I got into like a different thing. Basic. So share my screen. Oh, sorry. I don't know why the options are different now. Okay. Do you have my screen here?
Yes. Yeah, we have your words or objects slide.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm gonna start with a visual description of myself too. I am a person of Latino ethnicity. I'm wearing brown glasses, headphones, and a cream color sweater. So I am María José Castillo, and I'm an artist and graphic designer. I came to MCAD to major in print paper book in the MFA program. For 7 years, I have been working on graphic design studios and publishing agencies. Here's kind of like a showcase of my work. And I feel that my front-facing showcase of work, it's mostly like personal work. I prefer it to the client work because I feel that it's the one that shows what I actually strive to be doing. And before coming to the MFA program, it was office work, and now it's office work too, but something changed. And it's that I consolidated my art practice, both my art practice and my freelance work, under the moniker of words are objects, and that's how I kind of like show my work. So I will be introducing the theme of networking during conferencing and book fairs from the perspective of a graphic designer, which is what I am experienced in doing. My experience can be like, I have been in design conferences mainly. I have been in the AIGA, the Adobe Max conferences. I also was in the hosting committee of the Behance Portfolio Review in Bogota, in Colombia, in 2014 and 2015. So that's basically in the realm of conferences what I have experiences with. So this is a show of my branding. This is the business cards that I design. And I basically wanted to tell you a little bit of the story about my studio name too, because it's what I feel that I'm doing as to encompass all of the work that I do. So I definitely recommend that even though you don't have a moniker, all of the ways that you have to present your work are all encompassing or showcase also your personal style. So it makes it more recognizable to people. I do recommend printing and having with you always business cards. Some people would say that it's a dying art form, but I do find them useful. I hand out business cards all the time. I add them to the things I sell sometimes in like the bag, or I do design special thank you notes with my socials that I attach to the things I sell in book fairs or also in other circumstances. I do collect the business cards that I also receive, and I actually add them to my email listing. I do have an email blast that I design on MailChimp. I'm not like I don't use it all the time. I use it probably once or twice a year, but I do have an kind of like an email blast set up, and every time that I receive a business card on a conference that I kind of like make an acquaintance, I take the time to add it to that email list. So I find that that's a way of following up too. So I am gonna concentrate in kind of like the pre and the post things that I do to keep that momentum going after going to a design conference or participating in a book fair. So yeah, it's not a crazy mailing list. I send it once or twice a year. I add something like a freebie, something that people can download, kind of something that kind of like sweetens up the thing. And also I include the things that I'm gonna be participating across the year. Another thing that I do have, and this is kind of like a screenshot of an email that I just sent yesterday to a client that I'm working with. It's having a special business email. So I have a contact@wordsareobjects.com. And I also have a kind of like a little email signature that has my socials too. I find it also good to kind of like, I normally don't do like follow-up emails when I know someone just right away after a conference, but I do find it interesting if there's like a conversation going that got shortened or something, to kind of like send an email and it has my socials. So it's kind of like a way to continue the conversation. Also, another thing is that I have my social media practically focused on my work. So I have this social media profile that had all of my website, everything is kind of like, first glance is just my work, and my personal Instagram or social media is kind of like a part, and it's a little small. I don't dedicate that much time as I really dedicate to my work or studio Instagram, especially because this is kind of like the new business card, I feel. So it's like I go to an event or a conference, and it's always like, yeah, give me your Instagram and I'll give you mine, and you start to see the person's work like right away. So that's a good way to kind of like connect really quickly. Also, another thing that I have the kind of like the rhythm of doing is, in my website I do have a blog site. It's not a must, but I feel that it gives me the motivation to, first of all, document everything that I am part of. So every time that I have that I'm a part of a book fair, or I'm a part of an exhibition or something, I do take the time to register, to take pictures by myself. So I don't rely on a host or another person to document, but I also document. And it gives me the motivation to create texts around it, and kind of like just document the things that I am a part of. I think that that's always really good every time that I have to go back, and especially when I am in group exhibitions, like who I was with, how can I connect with those? So it kind of gives me a little bit of an archive that I can get back, and maybe another people stumble on that as well. So these are some examples of some documentation that I did, and that gives me the opportunity to also talk about something, and it's kind of like create like creative ways to interact with the people that are part of an exhibition or a book fair on a stand or something like that. This is an exhibition that I did with Camilo Aguirre, that was part also from the MFA program, and we did have a table with like a questionnaire. Like the exhibition was mostly to talk about the differences of living in the United States, and in our case, we are both from Colombia. So in terms of access to resources, etc. So I created a questionnaire. People at the end of the exhibition would find themselves in that table. We'll have the chance to talk to them, to exchange contact. So it's gonna like create a little bit of like a creative way to have the people also collaborate with you or leave their notes and leave their contacts as well. Another thing that I get asked a lot is where can they find my work? Sometimes I don't have the time for an Exi page, but I do have a Society 6. I also have kind of like a listing of the products that are on sale. And so people can see what it's on sale and a little bit more of information of what I have or what I bring. One of the things that I wanna also say here is that every time that there's a book fair that I'm part of, there's also costs in having the table, or maybe the place asks for a percentage of the sales. So I always up the prices for that. So it's good to have a good system to remember to kind of like up the prices, so we are not kind of like losing money, but we are always selling or work for what it's worth. And another thing is that I always have the work kind of ready for shipping, always packaged. I don't have a lot of space for storage, so having the work ready and packaged is a good way to, especially because I work with books and prints, to have them protected and have them ready to sell. It's a good way to also take care of the work. You can see a little bit of the smaller examples here. And another thing is creating bundles too. So offering more than one object or design. It's also a good way to show the work. And yeah, these are my socials, and thank you so much. Stop sharing.
Great, thank you so much. That was great. Molly, the floor is yours.
All right, I am going to share my screen. I'm always nervous about sharing screens, even though now we've been doing Zooms for like 2 years. So. All right, now, is that working? Sweet. All right, hi, thank you. Thank you so much, María José, too, for starting us off very strong. My name is Molly Murakami. As Alonso mentioned, I'm a cartoonist and illustrator and writer from the Minneapolis area, and I also graduated from the MFA program. I'll talk a little bit about my work and my experiences with conventions and fairs and fests and tabling and all that too. I use she, her pronouns, and I am, for an audio description of what my screen looks like right now, I'm a mixed race person. I have dark mid-length hair that I put up because I was getting tired of it. And I am currently sitting in my bedroom / office, but I have blurred my screen because it is not exciting, so you're not missing too much. This is just kind of a little bit more about me. I graduated from St. Olaf in 2014 with a degree in studio art, and then, as I mentioned, graduated with from MCAD in 2020, which was everyone's favorite year. Alonso mentioned I'm interested in family memory and identity in my work. And I thought I would also mention that I'm into sports, plants, reading, and drag race, since they do sometimes feature in my art as well. I mentioned what I'm interested in because I think it kind of leads me to talk about my work, which is a cartoonist. And I think for a lot of cartoonists, conventions can kind of be the bread and butter of your year. Some people operate that way. I don't so much, and I feel like I kind of got into tabling and got really excited about it in 2019, right before everything kind of imploded. So I have an interesting relationship with tabling itself. I'll just go through kind of what I worked on, so you guys can get a background of what I do. This is the thesis project that I did for the MFA program. So I work on autobiocomics and zines, but also longer projects like this, which was a graphic novel. It documented my kind of letters to my late grandfather and some of his life and where it intersects with mine. I was really interested in graphic medicine and generational trauma for this piece. I also love to do kind of quick diary comics or dailies, just kind of a nice like warm-up way for me to start working on something or to cool down from work from the day. This is another personal comic that I think I sold at the art sale. I'm not 100% remembering. And then lately I've been working on a residency with an organization called Dencho based out of Seattle. And they document firsthand accounts of Japanese internment and also the accounts of the survivors of Japanese internment. So this comic that I'm currently working on is about my great-grandfather and his family's life on Terminal Island, just outside of Long Beach, California, before and during incarceration at Manzanar. Now I'm working on a couple graphic novels and freelance illustration where I can, and also still now with conventions kind of coming back, trying to decide whether or not I can go to these conventions. As I mentioned, I kind of came into it a little bit later than some, and I was super excited to hear María José talk about like the AIGA and Behance and just various other conventions that I personally have not been to yet. I feel like I kind of haunt a lot of like the Small Press Expo, Toronto Comics Art Festival, local things like Twin Cities Zine Fest or Fall and Spring Con. I'm really interested in those, and I love that they can kind of give small and emerging artists a way to get their work into people's hands. So when I was asked to speak on this panel, I have a lot of experience as a goer to conventions, and they're some of my favorite times to meet people. I think that like networking can kind of be or it's just kind of a word, I think, where people are not always comfortable with it, or they think it's kind of exploitative. But to that I say there's a way to do it where you're actually being genuine. And I've met a lot of really, really great people through going to different conventions, book fairs and art festivals. So my first kind of comment would be just to go. Go bring a friend or go by yourself, because you'll meet friends, and just be open and see everything that's there. My advice is always to bring your own stuff. And here I've pointed out a couple of my pieces that I left on the free table at Small Press Expo. I went to Small Press Expo in 2019, and it was like the coolest convention I've ever been to, but I didn't go with the intent of tabling. I just wanted to go and walk around. I was going to be with friends and wanted to see a lot of the show, and it was totally worth my time just to go and meet people. But I figured as long as I was there, kind of like María José was saying, you always want to make sure that you're getting your work into the right hands too, or making those connections with other people. And so like the zines, I'll have my contact on them, my email and my socials. And it's a way for people to kind of get a glimpse of your work while you might not be, paying to table or like have all the time in the world to sit at a table all day. It was kind of a nice little like cop out for me to be able to be like, I went to this fest and I was able to share my work with some people. With a lot of people at smaller fests will even do trades. If you have a zine that you would love to share with them, they might give you one of theirs. And I also gave out gifts to a lot of like creators that I knew. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like so cool to meet you. Like I have this zine and I would just love for you to have it. It's just like, it's also kind of an icebreaker, which kind of leads into the don't be afraid element. I think that it can feel kind of imposter syndrome to go to a fest like this, especially if you're kind of unfamiliar with fairs and festivals. But it's a nice way to kind of just believe in yourself and break the ice and go up to somebody and be able to share your work and think that it's got value in and of itself too. And be genuine. I've met a lot of really cool people that have turned into really important professional contacts for me, just because we do the same stuff and we're interested in the same stuff through festivals and through like people that you meet at the festivals might introduce you to other people. So it's a wide web of people that are waiting for you to find them, I guess. Take people's cards, take photos of people's work, if that's okay, take photos of your experience. And yeah, the free table is your friend. And then also post about it. If you are tabling, and one of the last times that I tabled was actually at the MCAD art sale. And this was, I believe, 2019 too. And it was great. It was so nice. Like they had a little artist alley set up that was kind of working for all of the different comics people that wanted to exhibit. And it was a nice way for me too to kind of figure out like, what do I want to bring? What works for me to display, and what's going to like get people to come over and see my stuff. And a lot of that was posting. If you can post about that you're there, I think it's a nice way for local people who are following you to know about it, because I think a lot of fests and stuff kind of go under the radar unless you're like really embedded in that world. And then B, it's a nice way for you to meet like your little fan base too. I had a couple people that I had never met before come up at the art sale who I think I had recognized from them like following me on social media for a while. And that's so nice. It's such a nice way to like make a personal connection with people who are following your work and supporting you and just a nice way, like so nice to talk to people at these events too, because a lot of people are just walking by and you kind of are smiling and nodding and on autopilot a lot. But when you can have kind of that one-on-one interaction with somebody and make that connection, I think that goes a long way too. Yeah, I think that's all that I have right now, but if I can answer anything else in the Q&A kind of section, please let me know, because it feels like it went by very fast.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, and then Rachel, the floor is yours.
Okay. Give me just a moment to share my screen. So my slideshow is going to pale severely in comparison to the previous two. I'm kind of a messy pragmatist. And I got very carried away with my slides. I've been teaching for the last almost a month, and I'm in teacher mode right now. So everything is like break everything down into questions and bits and pieces. And so it's a lot of dialogue, or well, a lot of text versus images, but I like for people to be able to read what I'm saying or what I'm getting at in presentations. But so Self-publishing, printing for conventions and self-promotion. I would consider myself kind of an experienced artist in maybe the entry-level field or the small local creator conventions, kind of like Molly. But I've been doing it probably just a little bit longer. So my name is Rachael Bonebright. I go by Bonebright online. Those are my two last names, technically. I'm an artist and illustrator working in the Twin Cities. I'm also an instructor for MCAD's Continuing Education Department and an alum from the MFA program. I mainly teach experimental comics for both teen and adult groups. I work primarily in ink and other traditional media, with an emphasis on dark motifs and anxious emotions in my work. And I create both representational and abstract work. I'm also a fan of classic cinema, old movie posters, pulp novel covers, and very, very bad horror, all of which seeps into my work in some way or another. Vincent Price is my absolute favorite for bad horror. I love this man, and I have absolutely no reason to, but it's an obsession. This is a digital piece that I did just last year in 2021. Just a couple quick samples of my work. I tend to work traditional. I prefer ink. I like to be messy. I think it's just it's a much more satisfying way for me to work personally. And I think it's more visually interesting. Lately, I've been doing a lot of non-representational work that focuses more on just the act of painting or mark making with ink, specifically in states of like high anxiety or just raw emotion that needs to kind of come out. And so I've been painting circles for the last 3 years, and I think I have 334 feet of scroll paper of circles at this point. And sometimes that work transitions into my book work, which is more of what I do with regard to conventions, mostly zines, the occasional comic. I'm more of a comic enthusiast than a comic creator, but I do dabble. So I'm fairly new to zine making itself, but I've been comics and small press enthusiast since I was a teenager. I've been selling prints, and it says zines, but I've been selling zines since about 2017. But I've been selling prints at conventions since 2014. I've experienced the highs and lows of self-printing and promotion. I would consider myself a resource for entry-level production and exhibition of small works like zines and posters. And everyone's experience of the convention circuit is different. But here are some foundational tips that might help you if you are interested in getting started. And this is where my visuals drop off completely. So when it comes to printing, there are several things that you want to consider with regard to printing. Again, I'm in teacher mode this month, so it's very like instructional. What scale do you want to print at? It helps to have a few different size books and zines in your hands to know what feels right for you. The quality of your images or the conceptual subject of your book might dictate the size of the book itself as well. Details become tight and refined when you scale down from the original, so it's generally better to work bigger and print smaller. If you're relatively new to zine making, or if you've never made a zine before, I would recommend working at 11 by 17 because half that scale is 5.5 by 8.5, and that is a half sheet of printer paper. So it's easy to scale down to that half sheet and then just do like a centerfold piece of printer paper with a staple stitch. Just be aware of your margins every time you print, especially with regard to books. Recognize when you want a margin or when you want to bleed off the page, and do a couple of test prints before you print a full run. How much do you want to budget for printing? Consider how much you want to charge per copy, what the total profit may be compared to what you're spending. Most convention goers expect to spend a lot of money, but they expect to spend it on small purchases, particularly if it's like you might want to look at the entry fee for certain conventions. If it's like $5, they're probably not expecting to spend more than 10 or 15 on an individual item. Consider the quality of your paper, color versus black and white, your binding options. For a first-time project, I would suggest investing in the paper because that quality, when somebody picks it up for the first time, is what they'll notice first. But limiting yourself to black and white and saddle stitch, which is a staple binding, is an easy way to save on cost for a first print or maybe a more affordable project. How many copies do you want to print for your first run? You might want to consider whether you want to just try out a convention for the first time, or if you know for sure that you want to go to multiple conventions. Because if you're only going to start with one to see how it goes, and you're not really sure, I would print a pretty small run of 30 to 50 books. Sometimes you'll sell out right away, usually you don't. But if you're ambitious and dedicated, you might want to consider printing 70 to 100. This stock kind of allows you to have that one big print run and then sell over the course of time at multiple conventions. Will you be printing a second run? Sometimes limiting the number of copies of a printed book or poster or what have you increases its value just by its rarity. But on the other hand, sometimes that rarity only really shows its value over time in the resale market. And you don't really see a lot of return from that. It's really kind of your value as an artist and a social interest in your work that increases that value more than anything else in the resale market. For small independent printing, I think there's value in being able to make as few or as many copies of your work as you want. So it's okay to start with a small print run and then print more stock as you need. I'll interrupt myself very briefly to say, if I run too long, Alonso, just cut me off. If you're printing yourself, are you printing yourself or through a dedicated printer? Printing yourself is a lot of work, but it means that you have complete control. Printing through someone else means a lot of communication, but the labor is off of your hands. It also means that you will probably have a print minimum that usually for a small printer, it might be 50. For a larger printer, it might be 100. But certain materials for a larger printer might be cheaper in bulk as well. So conventions, some of the things you might want to consider if you want to get into conventions, or if you've only done a couple and you kind of want to do more. It's okay to participate before ever having attended one. I recommend bringing a friend or tabling as a pair with someone else your first time. That way you have somebody with you so you can get up and walk around, see what the convention is like, and meet other people. Give a little extra attention to the website and promotional materials for every event, particularly if you haven't attended that one before. See who their featured guests are, the tone of their ads, and see if it aligns with the work that you're already making. You can be successful in a space that doesn't cater to your style or genre, but it will give you an idea of what the convention goers are expecting going in. Which conventions do you want to attend? Consider your travel and table expenses, put a cap on how much you're willing to spend to attend an event. Sometimes that cap is a little bit higher if it's something that you really want to attend as a guest as well. Start local if you can, that saves on those travel costs, and find conventions that you want to attend, like as a guest and an exhibitor, because you'll be more excited and people will be drawn to that immediately. Kind of what Jose was talking about earlier, and Molly a little bit too. Are you going to prioritize selling product or marketing your skill for future opportunities, networking? And this is not a matter of underselling yourself for exposure. You should always pursue compensation for the time and materials you put toward your work. If you are prioritizing selling your books and products, put a little extra care into your quality of product. Focus on that quality before diversifying your stock. Sometimes you go to conventions and people have just like a ton of stickers and buttons, and all of those things are fantastic. But I think if you're really focused on the book and that's your passion, then you want to put as much effort and care into that as possible first. If you mainly want to network, consider having some smaller and cheaper books with you that you're comfortable selling at an accessible price point, or just giving away to somebody that you might want to work with. And you can recover that cost of giving away items by increasing the cost of the higher quality items if need be. And for tabling, some of the things you might want to consider are how much does it cost to table? Every convention is different when it comes to table fees. And I'm a little off on these numbers. This is just kind of from my experience, but it's been a couple of years because COVID. Most small conventions will charge a small fee for a half table, 20 to 40 bucks maybe, and a moderate fee for a full table, like 60 to 80. Whereas a larger convention will charge like between $100 and $500 for a table. Some local conventions don't charge a table fee at all, such as FallCon and SpringCon, which Molly mentioned earlier. My slide says in Minneapolis, but they're in St. Paul on the fairgrounds. And they're run by the MCBF, formerly the MCBA. They changed it to the Minnesota Comic Book Fans. When it used to be the Minnesota Comic Book Association, I think they got a little bit of confusion with the Minneapolis Center for Book Arts before. How many book titles and other items are you selling? It's okay to go into a convention with just one book to start, or even just one book because you've been focusing on it for so long and it's your passion project. But you want to be sure that that book is a strong piece of work and that it can stand on its own at your table. You can also sometimes fill space around that book with prints and buttons or semi-related items if it feels too sparse for you. I personally like when a table has a small collection of books and zines that are not crowded by too many other things, but that may not appeal to everybody. You kind of learn who your audience is and what they like the more that you table and meet people. And there's no right or wrong number of books or items to have at your table. I just recommend keeping your space uncluttered and easy to navigate visually. This is an example Trina Fernandez sent me of one of their, I don't know who their table mate is, but one of their setups for a flea market that happened over the summer. This one was outside, again, because of COVID. And that's kind of like my ideal table setup, relatively sparse. You can just walk up, talk, pick something up, flip through it, and not have too much to go through. How do you want to set up your table? There's just way too many ways to do it, and it's hard to know off the bat what works best for you. Oftentimes when you go to a comic convention in particular, you'll see for somebody who's been doing it for longer or somebody who's maybe more established, they'll have a banner behind them with their art, their name on it. That's a long-term investment that may or may not catch a few passing eyes unless your work is relatively recognizable. So I wouldn't recommend going right into that, even if you're really enthusiastic and you know you want to do this. Your art might also change at this point in your personal practice. So that's an investment that I would recommend, like maybe a couple of years down the line. For starters, just get a solid tablecloth, some basic book stands, and go from there. This is Trina's table again. Again, my ideal table. This is how I like doing things. I'm a messy pragmatist. This is my friend Ashley Masog's table, and she has a very different approach from what I do. And while she has a lot more items, a lot of color, a lot of stock, they're very orderly and easy to look through, particularly because she goes for a horizontal setup as opposed to a vertical setup as opposed to a horizontal setup. And I wanted to show like friends tables, so I only got a couple of people who got back to me. Otherwise, I would love to show more examples. But really, the best way to learn about the community and about kind of the process of tabling, the products that people are interested in. And like, I know I'm talking about product and all of this is your art and it's something that you love and you're passionate about. But, you know, people who walk by, they see it as an object that they're going to buy first. So that's kind of where I'm focusing my language at the moment. that is what I have. As a side note, Autoptic applications are due on April 30th. Autoptic is every other year convention for local creators. And I think the half table fee this year is about $100 is what I saw on the website. You'll want to Google it and double check for sure. A half table is actually a lot of space. So if that's something that you want to do with another person or two, that's kind of what I would recommend if you're not relatively well seasoned and accustomed to doing this work and investing that money. Yeah. Otherwise, that is what I have for you. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Great, thank you so much. There's a lot of good information in there. I mean, you all, I think, brought in so much wealth of knowledge. As someone who's like sort of an outsider in this medium, I'm like writing notes. But I think, yeah, we'll open it up to questions, comments. So folks, if you are interested in asking a question, comment, feel free to type it in the chat and I can read it out loud. Otherwise, you could also unmute yourself if you feel comfortable doing so. And then thank you, Alex, for sharing the link to
Autoptic.
Yes. Yeah.
I think Alex is on the board for that.
Oh, okay.
Representing.
Representing, yeah. Great. Well, folks gather questions. I kind of wanted to, and it looks like Ellen just typed in one. So I'll go ahead and read that, and then I'll go back to what I was gonna mention. If money, time were no issue, could you each describe your ideal tabling situation and how you might set things up ideally?
I'm a little spoiled by FallCon and SpringCon, where there is no tabling fee, so I can like that half table is usually enough for me, honestly, and even sharing that space with like one other person if I don't have a lot of materials, like I've only focused on 1 or 2 new zines at the time. That's more enjoyable for me, is being around a lot of people and being able to network. It's particularly for local convention spaces or like really focused convention spaces like comics and stuff. They're very community oriented. Like you get to know everybody there.
Yeah, I would say that there's like a feeling of satisfaction when like people actually buy your stuff. It's like, yeah, good, just take it. Sometimes I think like maybe like when I talk about like bundling things, like bundles, it's a good idea so people kind of feel like they're getting more or they're getting a little bit of everything. So kind of like offering bundles, like, okay, you get this thing and you get this thing, and you like you can make kind of like your own group of things. Also, it's good when you of course have like a background because like sometimes I do have like frame things, frame prints. Showing those things sometimes are hard just on a table, or I do a lot of like printmaking, so not as good as like showing so having a background if I can, that is good.
Yeah, and I love like walking around a convention and just like seeing what other people do too. I think that's so fun because just like with all of our art practices, it's like you walk past someone's table and you're like, I would have never thought to display zines this way, or or like the way that you have like this merch rack is really, really cool. So I always like to like cherry pick little ideas from different tables that I see and try and implement them in a way that makes sense for my own work. But like Rachel was saying, it's like, it's so nice when you go up to a table or when your table looks like this, when it's like neat and kind of clean. And I think if like money and time were no issue, just finding like really beautiful kind of setup for that and kind of cohesive, just like everything works together, that would be Very nice. I'm like wanting to table again sometime after doing
Oh my
all
God,
this.
yeah. The last thing have been online, and it's like definitely I have that feel of like, oh,
Yes.
missing.
That's great. Okay, that's I mean, honestly, I think that's a form of like sharing, like visual sharing in terms of like finding this sort of communal space and being like, oh, this is a good idea. I'm not like stealing it, but I'm also just like, that's a little bit of how I feel like when I go to Target or IKEA, just like window shopping. I'm like, I'm gonna change my living room.
Yes.
Anyway, there are questions in the chat, so I'll follow up with the second one. So Alex asks, how do you approach someone you want to work with at events like conventions or conferences? It's a great question.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've definitely had like fangirling times in conventions.
Oh yeah.
I met a lady from Venezuela. It's a lettering artist in AIGA. Her name is Velera. If you look for it, Bellera, and she works for like Penguin and like designing the covers. And I was like, oh my God, like I want to talk to her. And like I really, and she ended up her talk. And I went there and, hola, okay, we talk the same language. Yeah, I'm from Colombia. And yeah, we ended up talking a lot. She invited me to a studio visit in New York, and I haven't been back to New York in a long time. But I'm like, you know what? Like I still have her. Like she gave me the business card. She told me come visit. And next time I'm there, I'm just gonna go, and it's like, hey, where's my studio visit?
Yeah.
So definitely getting after that, like fangirling thing, it's good.
Well, and I think like you're saying too, it's just that act of initiating conversation and not letting yourself be too scared to go up to talk to somebody like that too. Like it's so easy to be intimidated by other people that you see at these conventions, but then you're like, we're all here just like doing the same thing, all trying to like sell our stuff or connect with other people. And that's why people go to conventions and why people table is to meet people and people who like their work. So I think it's important just to kind of I haven't had any experiences myself with like initiating a collaboration at a convention, but I have met people through conventions that ended up, like I mentioned, becoming more professional context for me that have connected me to different job opportunities afterwards. So I think that just making sure that you're, especially if you really love someone's work, that's going to come across as opposed to like, I just want to like schmooze you for this thing, or, to make a kind of phony connection. So I think that just making yourself go up and say hi is a good start.
Great, thank you. And then there's another question from Izzy. Are there any particular databases or resources that can make finding local conventions and fairs easier? That's another great question.
Oh, I was looking at these for my students this week. Let me pull it up on Google while the other two answer, but I do have like a list that I have made for my students in particular for local conventions or semi-local, kind of with a, hopefully not a high barrier of entry is my intention, but I don't attend all of them, so I don't know.
Rachel, do you know if a list like that is hosted anywhere?
Yeah, I found some, and I gotta look again.
Because I don't know. I feel like a lot of the conventions that I hear about, and when I started at MCAD in 2018, I was really new to comics and definitely new to like the community aspect of comics and conventions and tabling, and so I like didn't know anything. I feel I had been to TCAP, which is like the big one for indie comics, and so people kind of know about that, but like I feel like so many of the conventions and fests and things were just suggestions from other people who knew of them or word of mouth. So it would be very helpful to have kind of a database that would cycle through these, or have them listed in their like application dates and stuff like that too.
Yeah. Here we go. Fancons.com, maybe. I think that one was that the one I found before. Yeah, but this one is just national.
Yeah.
Well, this is stuff that I'm working on for my students right now in my experimental comics class. So if you ever want to reach out to me or send me your email and I can find that or give you the list that I've been working on, it's elambonebright@gmail.com. Yeah, I'm happy to help and work with people. I know that I found something very similar to what you're describing, and I can't find it right now. Thank you for typing that out.
Anytime. Great. So we have about 3 minutes or so, but yeah, this has been great, just in terms of you all sharing. And I think you all did it so differently, which I thought was great because I think it covers more. And it also shows that things like this are not linear, and there's like no right or wrong way to do this, but more of like, this is more beneficial to me, so I'm going to take this and apply it for myself. One of the things that I really responded to, I think Maria Jose, you kind of brought it up, and Molly, you also mentioned it in yours, was the idea of like taking images of you in these conferences and then like posting about that. I just want to echo that I think is a very smart way of networking, especially because I think it shows your online platform that you're actively doing this. And I think personally for me, I have gotten more opportunities that way. Like people see, oh, you did this. Well, I'm actually looking to do this. So I think that's a really smart way of approaching. And it's also easy to do. Just snap a photo and throw some filters on and hit share and voila.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely. Like there are things that I'm like, there is nothing that tells me like where this was, who was there, like that I've done before. And it's like, it's really good to take note, especially, and I also reiterate, if it's a collaborative thing, to kind of like always have like a list of the other people that were with you. The way is like, yeah, I was with you on this thing or something like that. It's always good to kind of like follow up on that way. Tag also, it's good tagging. So there's a registration of where you were and with whom.
Yeah, when I was trying to like look through photos for this, I was like, oh, I'm not taking enough pictures at conventions. Like I was like, I'm going and just like overwhelmed by everything, but I'm not taking enough photos because I only had a few of them. I liked how Rachel brought in some photos of different people's tables though. It's always so much fun to just see how people set up their stations.
Well, I'm really bad at the social media part of it too. Like I don't really, like I'm having fun, I'm enjoying myself, and I am like, I'm selling things and sharing my art with people, but I'm also not really focused on myself in that moment. So it's just, I've got a picture somewhere.
Somewhere.
Great. Were you gonna say something? No. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, all three of you. I think that you again presented a wealth of knowledge, and thank you for taking the time to share. Has been lovely, and to see the familiar faces again, even though they're not in person, but still. Yeah, and thank you all for joining us. Again, our next professional practice event will happen April 20th in the same link. So you just want to register. Other than that, have a good night, y'all. And thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. So nice to see you. Bye.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah.